Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Introduction to Lifecycle Marketing for Nonprofits. My name is Lila Piggott. I'm the Director of Nonprofit Business Development at Idealist Consulting, and I'll be your moderator today. I also want to quickly say, welcome to the cutting edge. Lifecycle marketing is a new notion in the nonprofit space, and it is exciting to be part of this conversation with innovators like you. Please note that during today's presentation, you will have the ability to submit questions via your control panel. We will be leaving some time at the end of the webinar to answer a few of these questions. We will also provide contact information if you wish to ask questions or explore this topic in more detail on your own. And lastly, please note that we will be sharing interesting facts and figures along the way, and we invite you to share some of these takeaways through your social channels. We will also be recording the webinar today and sharing that and the slide deck with all registrants. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today. Karen Casey is the Business Development Director and Alliance Manager for Right On Interactive, also known as ROI. She joined the firm in 2012 and brings more than a decade of sales experience to her role. She started her career at a national automotive marketing software firm and went on to work for the largest sales training firm in Indiana before joining ROI. ROI is a recognized thought leader on the topic of marketing automation and customer lifecycle marketing, as well as a leading provider in lifecycle marketing. Kirsten Kippen is the marketing manager for Idealist Consulting. She joined Idealist Consulting in 2013 and brings 8 years of nonprofit and marketing experience. She started her career at an international nonprofit managing a scholarship program and went on to do marketing for a translation firm before joining Idealist. Idealist Consulting is a preferred partner of the Salesforce Foundation and has been helping nonprofits and businesses implement Salesforce since 2006. Thanks again for attending today, and I'll now turn the conversation over to Kirsten.
Great, thanks everyone. It's great to be here today. So just to set the stage a little bit for our conversation today, at Idealist Consulting, we are constantly challenged to find innovative ways to help our nonprofit customers use CRM integrations to build their brand and also to drive quality interactions with constituents and donors. And so often this is achieved through specific campaigns. You're probably really familiar with how campaigns work in Salesforce. And more, we're also seeing evidence that sustained growth comes from teams who view engagement more as a journey or a path, hence the lovely Vermont Hills picture to the right here, rather than a one-time experience. This means being strategic and thoughtful about cultivating donors through each phase of their life cycle, from prospect to one-time donor to die-hard loyalist and donor for life. So we want to set a baseline for today's webinar that we're assuming that you will have a CRM in order to, just as a baseline before applying some marketing automation tactics. And also I wanted to just acknowledge that we have a diverse group on the webinar today, and we'll be using the example of outreach to donors to guide the conversation. But if you don't work with donors yourself, just take a moment to think, who is your audience? So this could be program participants, grant recipients, maybe members. So I'm going to just pause for a second. You can think kind of who your main constituents are, and that would be the person that you want to have in mind as we go through the content today. Also, I want to acknowledge the language that we've chosen for today's webinar. So when we speak about lifecycle marketing, if the term marketing doesn't work for you, it sounds kind of salesy perhaps, or more of a private sector term, just insert the word engagement. So in my own career across both nonprofits and the private sector, I've noticed that a lot of marketing automation terms can initially feel a little bit strange to nonprofits, but actually can be incredibly helpful in terms of how to view nonprofit engagement. There are a lot of nonprofits still operating manually through one-off campaigns, and so you're going to have a major leg up if you can start applying some of the lessons of lifecycle marketing and marketing automation. And as Lila was saying, this is really emerging technology. For nonprofits, you're in a very select few people who are even thinking about marketing automation or lifecycle marketing right now. And so by caring about this topic today, you're really on the cutting edge. So pat yourselves on the back for that. And before we dig into our agenda, I'm going to launch a quick poll so that we can get a sense of who is on the line today. Okay, so hopefully this is up on the screen. It's about how would you categorize your current communication strategy. So I'll leave this up just for about 30 seconds or so. All right, we got a couple more people getting their votes in. Great, so I'm going to go ahead and close here and show you guys the results. So as you can see, about 82% of the folks on the line today consider themselves kind of medium in terms of their communication strategy, which is just where you should be to be on the call. So that means that you have email and social media and some basic web analytics in place, but not a whole lot of automation yet. And then 12% are at an automated stage, so great for you guys. There'll still be a lot of good content for you. And then finally, 6% have just a basic strategy in place with just email. Okay, so with that, we are going to launch into the agenda with Karen.
Thanks, Kirsten, and thanks again to the whole Idealist team for hosting the webinar today. They have been a great partner of ours and are really adept at integrating CRM and marketing strategy. So as you can see on the screen, I wanted to start with a quick agenda. We will start out with exploring the path to lifecycle marketing, which includes the who, what, and how of data capture, and then the who, what, and how of email marketing. I would say the majority of the webinar will be spent discussing constituent lifecycle marketing and sharing best practices at every stage in the journey. And then we'll wrap up with Kirsten and me talking about our aha moments that we learned during the webinar. And of course, we'll leave some time for questions. As Lila mentioned earlier, please feel free to submit questions throughout the entire webinar. We might stop in the middle if it's super relevant to the discussion. Otherwise, we'll hold those questions to the end. And for those of you that are tweeters, it's always fun to tweet throughout a webinar, and you'll see the little birdie icon. You can see that in the top left corner there. Feel free to tweet the stat or message on that page and include the Right On Interactive and Idealist Consulting handles, and that'll be awesome to get some of the content shared with our larger audiences out there. So jumping in, there is lots of buzz today about big data, and there's also lots of confusion. So I'd like to boil it down to three things: the who, what, and how. I was actually talking to a prospect of mine last week, and he was mentioning to me that he was afraid his data was not in good enough shape yet for lifecycle marketing. And honestly, he wasn't the first one that ever told me that. It's a pretty common theme. Kirsten, do you ever hear individuals say this in your world?
I do, yeah, all the time from customers, and it's something that I can appreciate myself as a marketer as well. So we have a lot of clients who are concerned that their staff isn't diligent enough about putting their data into their CRM tools, or they just don't even have enough resources to do it consistently. And I can feel that pain myself. You know, we have a relatively small team, and so we put data into our CRM, but I don't think all of us always love to do it.
I'm not sure if anybody loves doing it, but it's really important to remember that your system is only as good as your data. I think what most people don't realize that in 22 months, 30% and more of people change jobs, and another 30% plus change roles within a company. So in 22 months from now, that good data you have is going to actually be bad. So data cleanup is not a one-time project. It's an ongoing best practice, and utilizing a tool like Lifecycle Marketing can actually incentivize your reps to be more focused on CRM upkeep. I think one of the most common mistakes I see is that organizations try to slay the dragon. And what I mean by that is they ask their staff to capture 20 pieces of data, and this is a horrible strategy. You really need to distinguish between the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. And ask yourself, what are you actually going to do with the data you are collecting? And unless it's going to help you with segmentation or triggered communications, I would really challenge yourself on if you really need it. Definitely don't fall into the trap of collecting data because you can. If you can't think of a use, I would say just don't gather it.
So who do you want to have in your CRM? A really good starting point is your donors, which probably sounds really obvious, but you'd be surprised at the number of clients we work with who still manage some of the donor data in Excel spreadsheets. In addition, you want to have the prospects that your team is actively engaging. And then as a growth goal, over time, you might want to consider adding leads. So leads are a little less common in the nonprofit world, but Salesforce, as you might know, is built to manage leads as one of the objects. And so it has easy tools like Web to Lead that you can integrate into your website to collect early interest. You might also want to consider what data you want to capture. Initially, you'll have first, last name, perhaps company, although that's not as relevant for nonprofits, definitely email address, probably phone number, and that's enough to get started. And then once you have some basic email marketing in place, you can start to grow to get additional data. And at this point, you might consider getting title, address, possibly some more information that could help you build out donor personas at some point.
Then the last part is really the how, and that's the big question I always get asked is, how do I get the data? So remember that every contact point with a constituent is an opportunity to capture data. I would recommend you make a list of all of your constituent touch points and determine how you can capture at each of those points. So start out with the obvious. Your website. This is a place where you can easily add a form. Then I would think about a fundraising campaign call. It really only would take about 20 seconds to ask and transcribe a donor's email. You could even have a contest with your team to see who can capture the most data points. And also incentivize your constituents to part with their details. This could be with a raffle form at maybe an event, or something of value like a book by your nonprofit founder, or even something like a branded water bottle. I actually gave my annual donation to NPR last week, and they offered me a chance to win an iPad if I gave them my email address.
And did you give it to them?
Of course I did. I mean, who doesn't want a new iPad or another iPad? Another suggestion is to collect data in a standardized format. I think whenever possible, you want to reduce creativity from your constituents and your staff. So think of drop-downs as your best friend. Instead of leaving the field of titles, say, wide open, have a drop-down that includes a list of 10 titles. And it's okay if they're not going to be exact. You can, basically what you're trying to do is just categorize so that you can report on trends later. And also remember to not ask for everything all at once. And it's okay to build things up over time. Studies have shown that people will only provide 3 pieces of information at a time. And so Right On Interactive has forms that provide progressive profiling, which is really nice.
Yeah, I love this feature. So here's how it works in case there's folks who don't understand progressive profiling, which is totally where I was a couple months ago. So if I go to a website for the first time, it will ask for my first name, last name, and email usually. And then the next time I go back, it'll recognize me and also ask 3 different questions instead of those ones that I've already given it. So that way that you can start building out more complete profiles without making your constituents fill out the same information over and over.
Now, the next stage on the path to Lifecycle is email marketing. And there are all different types of email marketing. So again, we'll go through that who, what, and how. And keep in mind that these steps apply even if you're using a more simple program like MailChimp in conjunction with, say, Google Analytics. But you can really supercharge your efforts with a more complex program like Right On Interactive with Web Analytics. So the starting point for the who is most people do what we call batch and blast emails. Basically, everyone in your database is getting the same message. Then the initial growth opportunity really doesn't have to be complex in this stage. It can simply be to separate your prospective donors from your donors. And most CRMs actually allow you to choose a type within the account field so that you can flag an account as a prospective donor or donor. And if you don't know how to do that, I'm sure Idealist can help you customize this for your organization. Then for the what. Most nonprofits are going to start with a monthly newsletter. And there's nothing wrong with that, assuming your content is interesting. And if you're struggling with content, I would just suggest maybe doing something quarterly instead. What's really important is just starting to reach your audience on a regular basis. Our recommendation is that these newsletters are going to have strong calls to action to your website, since at this stage you want to drive everything there. Also, it's nice to have calls to action to link over to your organization's social site. Now with the what, the growth area is to set up a subscription center. And this is going to allow you to start capturing constituents' desired preferences. Then lastly, you've got the how. I would suggest start by measuring opens and clicks so you can understand what information is really resonating with your audience. And then this will also allow you the opportunity to modify content based on what's being consumed. Then the growth opportunities would be to A/B test both your subject lines and your content. So basically just testing out different types of messages to see what is really resonating with that audience.
All right, so to dive into this a little bit deeper, we want to give you guys a few email subject line tips. Some of these you probably know, and probably, hopefully, some of them might be new to you. So first of all, subject lines are important for email marketing because if you don't get somebody to open your email by looking at the subject, any great content in it is kind of worthless, right? So first of all, you want to keep it short and simple. A typical inbox reveals just about 60 characters of an email subject line, while a mobile phone would show just 25 to 30 characters. Get right to the point in just 6 to 8 words. Second, place the most important words at the beginning. So a whopping 50% of emails, just to reiterate the mobile thing, which you guys have all heard many times, I'm sure, are read on mobile phones. So if you don't know how much of the subject line will be viewable from a smartphone, it's good to put the most important information at the beginning. Otherwise, it might get cut off. Third, be very clear and specific about the topic of the email. The subject should communicate exactly what you want the person opening it to do and what the email is about, so that they can prioritize it. There's a current practice of using deliberately vague subject lines like, do you have a second, or hi, to sound personal, even when it's coming from a business or an organization. And personally, although this might be enticing and make you want to open it, it's a little annoying and probably is not the best way to really engender support and trust with your constituents over the long term. So it's better to be clear and direct. Fourth, highlight the value you have to offer. This is especially important when you're sending emails to prospective donors. You need a subject line that indicates value and communicates what they're going to get. Pique the reader's interest by offering them something that's helpful, and again, make it really clear in the subject line what's in it for them. Fifth, consider personalizing. This can definitely be overdone, but you have the first names probably for most of your constituents, and so why not use that as a merge field once in a while and put a name in the subject line to see how that goes and see if that makes people open it more often. Sixth, create urgency by limiting the time frame. So to grab someone's attention and persuade them to reply, consider creating a deadline for your proposition. Common ways of doing this include using the phrase respond now, or limited space available maybe if you have an event. Something along those lines can create some urgency. And then seventh, A/B testing. So Karen spoke to this briefly a minute ago, but this is basically a concept where you would test two different subject lines against each other and send half of your emails with one subject to one segment of your list and half with one subject that's different to the other segment. And then you see which one performs better and see which one is opened more often and use that one moving forward. So overall, I always give advice to communications professionals to just think about what works for you. Think about what emails you like to open. And you're probably not that different from your other constituents. So, apply the best practices that you see out in the world too. Okay, so moving on. When you think about measurement, what do opens and clicks really tell you? They might tell you that one fundraising campaign is of greater interest than another, but it doesn't really tell you what happens once someone clicks through to your website. You don't really have any idea if they're looking at the careers page or if they're a donor who looked at 11 different pages of your website. And so, you probably have your own stories about this, but something that I keep in mind is some emails I got this past weekend where one email was from a mortgage company about refinancing my house, but I just refinanced 5 months ago, so I wasn't interested and I just deleted it right away. I got a second email from Crate and Barrel, and I was just there and looked at some yellow dishes, and they sent me an email for a discount on those yellow dishes. And it worked right away. I was like, yeah, I need these, and they're targeting me, and it's a good thing. So I engaged with that right away. So this is why email marketing is not enough by itself. You have to be able to track some of these other touch points too, so that you can target people who've already started a digital conversation with you. In addition, you need to know which engagement efforts are influencing donations. At the end of the day, for a nonprofit communicator to be able to justify their existence, they need closed-loop reporting, which allows you to connect every donation back to an original outreach effort. And Salesforce, again, can help you do this. Finally, consider this. Email lists are growing by about 11% in the nonprofit world, which is great, but you should use multiple touch points through social media and through your website to engage from different directions. All right, so a few more stats. I love throwing in statistics whenever possible to strengthen this idea. And so far, much of what we've talked about has been about leads and finding new donors, which is definitely a priority, but I think anyone in development knows that it's probably easier to upsell an existing donor than to acquire a new one, right? It's typically quicker too. And again, this term upsell, I hope it's not, you guys don't consider it a turnoff, but we're trying to apply some of these terms that you'll see frequently in marketing automation in the private sector and apply it to the nonprofit world. So this idea of upselling could be, making someone into a major donor, making someone into a recurring donor, that sort of thing. So a few statistics. The first one, we just did a webinar last year with our partners at Classy, which is a peer-to-peer fundraising group, and we discussed the power of recurring donations. Nonprofits can often fall into a feast or famine mode where you're just going between several big campaigns each year. And this is really stressful because up to 75% of one-time donors will not give again, so it's really hard to forecast. Second, consider this. It's 10 times more expensive to gain a new donor than to keep an existing one. So just consider that for a second, 10 times more expensive. Our client, Team Rubicon, saw a 68% increase in recurring donors in 11 days by just changing their ask to emphasize the option of becoming a recurring donor. Lifecycle marketing or segmenting your email list can really help you do this in a targeted way.
So email is not enough, but you might be asking and thinking to yourself, but why lifecycle marketing? Well, the reason why lifecycle marketing is so important today is because the buying process has changed. Something I didn't realize before I started putting together this webinar is that the traditional marketing funnel was created back in 1898, so a long, long time ago. And I would venture to say that a few things have changed since then. Back when I first started as a sales rep, there were very few media choices that a company could reach out by. You know, you had newspaper, radio, and TV. But today's buying process, there are lots of choices that are involved, and we all choose to consume in different ways. Some of us might prefer social media, some email, some the web, etc. The process is certainly more complicated, and individuals are so far down the buying cycle before they actually talk to someone. And because of this, the communication has to be really unique to the individual and the stage of the relationship they are in with the organization's mission. So what is constituent lifecycle marketing? Lifecycle marketing is getting a lot of buzz today, and there seem to be a few different definitions. So I want to start by talking about kind of what you might hear and like the differentiators there. So you may hear some email marketing companies talk about the life cycle, and they focus it around a campaign with 5 emails. The beginning of the life cycle being the first email, and the end of the life cycle being that 5th email. That's not really life cycle marketing. You may also hear the term marketing automation. Life cycle marketing tools have marketing automation features, but marketing automation tools do not have life cycle capabilities. So hopefully that makes sense. Life cycle marketing is really the journey that someone takes with your organization. This is from the time they are a prospect to a loyal advocate and every step in between. It's one single view of the constituent with all of their engagement touch points. And you can see in the top right-hand corner here some of the typical feature sets that are included in lifecycle technology. So what I want to do now is to drill in a bit more about how a lifecycle solution works. What you're seeing on your screen is a sample journey that someone could take with your organization. And this is just a sample. We would obviously customize this to every organization that we work with. So first off, on the vertical axis, you see the profile. So this is who is an ideal fit to be a donor with your organization. On the horizontal axis, you've got engagement. And this is where we would work on coming up with a scoring algorithm based on all of the different marketing touch points that you have with an individual. So for example, giving a higher amount of points for somebody that clicks through on an email, and maybe negative points for somebody that unsubscribes from your email communications because clearly they're not all that interested in hearing from you. And then the third part of that scoring is the stage in the life cycle. So you can see there's these 5 stages here: attract, convert, onboard, expand, and appreciate. So what we do is we come up with what are the different stages that an individual goes through, and then what are the gate criteria that move someone from stage to stage. So to make this come to life, I have a few samples. So here is Kim. She's registered to win in an event. You can see she's a great profile fit, but she's really not all that engaged. Then I've got Alex over here, and he's a new donor with your organization. He's got a great profile fit, and he's also really highly engaged at this point. Now, the ultimate goal is to get both Kim and Alex to be over in that appreciate stage, and obviously that top right-hand quadrant is going to be that best fit and most engaged. But the method to get them both there is going to be very different. With Kim, since she's not all that engaged, you might just want to put her on some sort of nurturing campaign to help get her engagement score up, and at that point, then obviously decide on how really is best to communicate with her. Alex, on the other hand, he's just been onboarded with your organization. He might have just made that first donation. With him, it might be triggering an automated alert to set up a phone call to Alex to thank him for his donation and talk about other ways to get involved with your organization. So when a new customer comes on board at RightOn, we host a lifecycle workshop with the entire team. And the starting point is to really understand which stage for them is the greatest priority. I was attending a workshop last week, and I had the CEO in the room, the membership director, and development director. And they all had a different perspective on which stage was really the most important. And I'm wondering if you guys have any idea of what they were saying. So the CEO thought the appreciate stage was really where we should focus. The membership director said the convert stage because those were his qualified member prospects. And then the development director said the attract stage because that is what fuels her donor pipeline. So by utilizing a tool like Lifecycle Marketing, it really provides a way for different departments to get on the same page. So once you determine the priority, then we start talking about what the goals are of each stage. And it's really bigger than just an email campaign. You really have to think about what you want to accomplish and how you want people in each stage to feel. So the first stage is attract. And these are the people that don't know very much about you. And in this stage, you just want them to understand who you are as an organization. In the convert stage, this is where we are talking about donation impact, and they start to realize the true value. In the onboard stage, these are going to be your donors. And you want them to experience your differential and feel like they are glad they chose your organization. And then in the expand stage, these could be the folks that are making, recurring donations, on a regular basis. And then lastly, the appreciate stage are going to be your brand loyal folks. You're rolling out something new, you want to get their opinion, someone needing a reference, these are the folks you're going to go to. Now what I want to do, that's kind of the high level overview, but I want to go through each stage and talk about them one by one. And as we do that, I want you to think about your own stages and how your constituents relate. So starting with the attract stage, keeping in mind that this stage you probably don't know a lot about these folks, so you're really fishing in the pond to see who takes a bite. And not all the fish are going to be interested in your bait. So rule number one is don't try to sell these people. They aren't ready to donate. Basically focus on outcomes, aspirations, and goals. Don't focus on fundraising right away. This stage is also all about thought leadership. So with RightOn Interactive, our mission is to be the authority on lifecycle marketing. So to relate that to you, your attitude should be, I don't care if you donate. I want you to come to our website and get to know our mission and programs because we do such inspiring work. Something else to consider is sometimes the people in this stage, you don't even have their email yet, so you really want to be looking at how can you drive more opt-ins. Also, the website should be the hub. Every potential donor touchpoint you have should have a strong call to action to go back to the website so we can capture that web behavior. And during this stage, potential donors are typically looking for an organization, say through Google or another online search engine. For example, with RightOn Interactive, we were recently looking for a new CRM to use, and we did a lot of searching with the keyword CRM for technology companies. At that point, in that attract stage, we weren't looking for one particular CRM. Now, some great ways at this stage to engage with constituents would be social media, I would also say direct mail, and events. Kirsten, would you mind speaking to how this looks with some of your nonprofit clients today?
Sure, absolutely. So we have a lot of clients who host large events for new donor prospects to mingle and learn more about your organization with the ultimate goal of finding some new major donors, of course. And these events can be really expensive and complicated to plan, as anyone who's ever planned any event from a birthday party to a major gala knows. So often they're at beautiful venues like vineyards or, beautiful ballrooms, that sort of thing. And you want to really make the most of that investment. So here's a possible strategy that you could try to make the most of that. First, consider your VIP attendees. So these are maybe major donors you've worked with in the past, and send them an email with an invitation to come to a private cocktail reception before the event. And the call to action would be to go to the website to download the VIP pass, and also, this is the key, invite a friend of theirs. So that way you can meet some new people. Second, after that, a week before the event, you want to build out a communication strategy. And so any VIP attendee who has not gotten the guest pass yet from the website can get sent through the development staff who follows up with a personal invite. And then finally, after the event, alerts can be sent through software like RightOn Interactive to your development staff again once the engagement for one of the new prospects gets to a certain threshold that it's now time to call. So maybe once they've clicked a few links on their website or made a small donation, that sort of thing, it's worth engaging and reaching out personally.
So moving on to the convert stage, this is when you want your potential donors to start recognizing the value of your organization. So the potential donor is researching you, but they may also be looking at other nonprofits. So you want to ensure that the value proposition and the positioning against the competition is really strong. You're still really focusing on pushing people to your website.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that even nonprofits have competitors. You might not think about this all the time, but consider a campaign like the Willamette Give Guide in Portland, if there's any Portland folks on the line here. This is an annual campaign where people can choose to give to multiple organizations at once. So you just have to log in once, and then you can search through different categories and pick $25 for one and $25 for another. And the key is that organizations in this campaign are grouped by a category like animals or children. And so you really have to make your brand stand out and show how you're going to be showing the most impact to your donors by giving to you. And even, when you're just launching campaigns through your website or other different channels, and it's not a coordinated citywide effort like Willamette Guide, this really is relevant, that you still need to stand out and show that you're going to have impact for your donors.
Great point. And at this stage, the potential donor is transitioning from that search marketing that I was explaining to discovery. So in the previous stage, we talked about how when Right-On was looking for a CRM and we Googled CRM for technology companies, but when we got to the convert stage, we had our short list of companies and we were looking at online reviews and started to search, actual company websites. What you want to do is make sure that your organization is featured in the places where your potential donors are researching and make sure that that message is speaking to their needs. So for example, with our CRM exploration, the one we ended up choosing, we found from retargeting ads that were placed strategically based on our web browsing history. And because we are going to be tracking identified visitors that come to your website at this stage, you can really provide targeted content based on engagement. And engagement at this stage is going to transition to become more one-to-one with, personalized campaigns, digital marketing, maybe even webinars. And since this is a stage where I would say, a development officer is typically involved, sending automated alerts to them when a certain action is taken can be a vital step as part of a campaign. So for example, at Right-On Interactive, if someone looks at more than 4 pages of our website, we consider that to be a hot lead. And when that happens, we send an automated alert to our sales team. So you could do something similar with your development staff. Now, the onboard stage, obviously this is when your donors. But sadly, this is a stage when a lot of organizations stop engaging, and that's really a huge mistake. And one could argue that this stage is really crucial to making a great first impression. So the first thing I would encourage and to kind of emphasize here with the onboarding process is to make it simple. And a good way to streamline it is with automation. So Lifecycle software can provide triggered alerts for behaviors. And I know that sometimes nonprofits are often measured on engagement with donors. And one of our customers has studies that show if customers don't share on social media at least once in that first 30 days, that they're not going to be as likely to donate in the future. So what this customer, they told us about this stat, and what they did is they used our software to trigger alerts to someone that had not shared on social media. And so when that happened, then they could provide some suggestions of maybe things to tweet or other types of content that they could share with their network. Another big thing with the onboard stage is to provide a consistent experience for all constituents. And this is one of the biggest advantages of using an automation system. This ensures that everyone is going to have the same experience, and then that human error or the lack of follow-through doesn't occur. Even though somebody is just a new donor, you have to remember that retention starts the first day they come on board. And you really want to pay attention to those that are unengaged, that are in the bottom left of the quadrant. If they are unengaged in that first 30 days, you're likely going to be at risk to lose them down the line. And you really want to make sure that they have that great first experience. And if not, being able to utilize those, troublesome times to troubleshoot to figure out how it could be different next time. And then lastly, some engagement channels at this stage that should be chock full of member, benefits and opportunities, such as, videos and webinars are going to be great tools for this. Then when somebody moves into the expand stage, I would say this is where you really have the opportunity to take your relationship with the donor to the next level and make the most of your relationship. Kirsten, do you have any examples of how some of your customers might be doing this today?
I do, yeah. So one of our clients that I spoke about briefly earlier is a disaster relief organization, and their focal point is to raise money towards relief efforts like the recent Nepal earthquake. And of course, the second goal is also to obtain recurring donors. And so what they do is they use profiling and segmentation to identify who might be most likely to become a recurring donor based on historic data. And then they target them with specific campaigns that involve social media, email, and direct mail. So they can really focus on those influencers and, you know, kind of biggest bang for your buck people that they can reach out to.
Sure. And then after the expand stage, you move into the appreciate stage. And the appreciate stage people are the brand loyal advocates, you know, possibly lifetime donors or major donors. And you want to obviously take care of these people. This should definitely be high touch, but high touch doesn't mean that parts of it can't be automated. So for example, one of our customers sends a box of chocolates out on their major donor's birthdays, and that's done automated through the software by sending a CSV file to the printer and the shipping company. So really anything you can do to delight and surprise a valued donor is going to pay you dividends. We also have a customer that the executive director of the organization places a phone call once a year to anyone in this appreciate stage. So the executive director gets an automated email each month with a list that she should call and reach out to. Another thing to note is that this is a great group of people to ask their opinions, maybe, you know, send surveys to, if you want to create a focus group. This could be, you know, trying to find out about donor satisfaction or even to get ideas and thoughts on new program ideas.
Okay, so far we've talked about actions that can be taken at every stage of the life cycle. And campaigns are a really big part of the touch points that you probably apply regardless of whether you're in a marketing automation tool yet or not. So I think a mistake that I see made a lot is that people really get caught up in getting a campaign out the door, and you don't take the time to do that upfront work to really plan it and think through what you want the campaign to do. You know, I've definitely run campaigns myself where I didn't even have a goal in mind. I was just like, let's get this event page up, you know, hope for the best, kind of cross your fingers and, you know, troubleshoot the major issues. But it can be hard sometimes to have that long view in mind when you're just racing to get the basics covered. So here's 10 things to keep in mind that will really help drive performance through this whole process. First, consider your objective. So what is your overall objective for the campaign? For example, it might be to get 5 new donors in 3 months. Make it really specific. Second, consider your audience and source. You want to consider who specifically will be the audience for your campaign. Think about the demographic that you want to target. If there's any sort of persona or past action, lack of action that you can target. And then from there, what sources will the audience or segment be derived from? So typically you would start with an existing database for this, and then maybe consider using something like LinkedIn or other social media tools to reach out and maybe find some new people. Third, consider your key message. It can be really easy sometimes to get a little fragmented when you're trying to run a campaign. So consider a key message and write it down. Make sure anyone involved has this as a touch point. And that will be leveraged and utilized throughout the different tactics and treatments. Increased collaboration with industry peers is one example of what a key message could be. Or maybe you just want to keep it simple and say, like, become a donor or help a school be built. Have it really focused on the impact that your donors will feel once they do become a donor. Fourth, consider your value proposition. So this is, again, some kind of private sector terminology, but it can be really helpful for you guys in the nonprofit space to consider as well. So a value proposition is basically just what you're giving your audience. And people are naturally really self-oriented. You want to always consider how becoming a donor might help them in addition to helping your mission. So for example, you're probably contributing to some sort of larger goal that they have on a personal level at some point, such as building a global community, something along those lines. Fifth, consider your channels. So this is everything from email to direct mail, social, blog, all of those are different channels. and maybe even networking events. 6, consider your content assets. So what are the marketing assets that'll be utilized, either existing or new assets that you need to develop? Maybe this would be a snappy video or some donor testimonials in addition to, just some basic images and copy that you'll use in your communication. 7th, consider a call to action. Ideally, you just want one call to action in each message you send out. So for example, maybe it's to schedule a meeting with your development staff face-to-face, that you want new donors to reach out and just have coffee, that sort of thing. 8th, consider how you're going to measure results. So this could be a few different things. We talked about email opens and clicks as being kind of a basic baseline for this sort of thing. But then in addition to that, maybe you want to consider measuring how many meetings are scheduled as a result of the campaign, or even how many new donors you created. 9th, consider your schedule. So you don't want to have a campaign be open indefinitely. It's usually time bound, and so maybe it's open for 60 days where you have this specific strategy in place and then you move on to the next thing. And then finally, you want to consider costs. So there's a lot of soft costs or unseen costs in most companies, and especially nonprofits where you're doing a lot yourself, but you might want to consider how many hours your staff is putting into the campaign, in addition to any hard costs that you have for software or event space or that sort of thing. And this way you can tell, you can measure those costs against the return that you get so that you can see what's working and what's not working so well next time around. All right, so we are almost to the end of our content. So Karen, as we've been working on this webinar together, what have you learned? Do you have some aha moments that you can share?
Sure. So obviously you can see on the screen there that the first thing I really learned was you have to start somewhere. I think the worst thing you can do is to continue to get ready. So as we touched on earlier, even if it's simply a monthly newsletter being sent out to start communicating more frequently with your constituents, I think that's better than doing nothing. The second thing I'd like to mention is the discussion on the marketing funnel being dead. As a sales professional, I can confirm that a new donor does not become a new donor just because of one call or one email. It's really about the entire journey and their complete experience with you and your organization. And then lastly, relevancy is a powerful thing. Everybody is busy today, and it's easy to overlook any information that we receive that's not relevant to us at the exact time that we are engaged. So with lifecycle marketing, you can easily target the right person at the right time with the right message. What about you, Kirsten? What stood out for you most today?
Yeah, so first of all, I think, as I've been saying throughout, I think there's a lot of concepts in lifecycle marketing or marketing automation that can be really, really helpful for nonprofits. So, so one thing I learned when putting this together is that a lot of the language in marketing land is not necessarily tailored to nonprofits initially, but there's a lot of really, really smart tools that the nonprofit sector and particularly development staff have to gain if they can apply some of these lessons. Second, this concept of upselling and retaining being easier than new donors. I think this really stood out to me, that the statistics are really startling, that it's easier to get momentum with recurring donors and be able to forecast a pipeline rather than always having just one-time donors and having to depend on them hopefully coming back the next year. And third, results are bigger than opens and clicks. So measurement is so critical, and having a CRM that integrates with marketing automation tools is really the best way that you can measure more than just opens and clicks through your email program. So you want to move towards closed loop reporting, which again is when you can link any donation or any outcome back to original touch points throughout the lifecycle marketing process. And that way you can understand what influences are really driving donor and member behavior. Okay, so we are just about done here. And we just have a few more things to wrap up before we dive into questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Lila. And she might be muted.
Thanks.
There we go.
Yep, I was the unmuting, the ever confusing unmuting. Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to say, before we open up for questions, I wanted to remind people that we will be sending a recording of this webinar along with the slide deck to all registrants. In addition, we're going to be sending a 10-question assessment that will help us work with you to prepare for lifecycle marketing. The Right On Interactive and Idealist Consulting teams are offering a complimentary discovery session to anyone that fills out the assessment. So if you are interested in that, please fill that out. And then after the discovery session, we'll be able to put together a personal action plan for you. And I think that moves us into questions. So let's take a look. Hold on just a moment. Let's see. I have a question for you, Karen. So in your experience looking at your most successful marketing automation customers, what is it that they did particularly well that made their program successful? And how do you think that strategy could be applied in the nonprofit sector?
That's a great question. I think it would be probably 2 or 3 things here. We'll start here with the first. The thing that I would say that makes things most successful is going to be having a great job with data from the outset. So when I think of some of the nonprofit, examples, you already have some good data collected on your prospective donors and donors, and being diligent, if I could talk here, being diligent about collecting more of that data. And I must say that it's not really just any kind of data, but about information that is really relevant to your organization and what makes somebody truly a good donor for them, and being, honest with yourself about that. I think the second thing would be having a solid content strategy for each life cycle stage. So, obviously we went through 5 different stages throughout the webinar today, but really having a good understanding of your audience and the content that really makes somebody tick. What's going to make them respond, what's going to really resonate with them. And then I think the third, if I could just add in a third here, would be having a CRM. I know Kirsten mentioned that in the very beginning when we started, but just making sure that you have one and making sure you're using it properly. And if not being afraid to ask for help, whether it's with, other, nonprofits that have had better success with using CRM, or reaching out to even a company, like Idealist.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to jump in real quick on the CRM point, I think most people would probably agree that it's hard to use marketing automation tools by themselves without a CRM. And so
Sure.
A big part of what Idealist Consulting does as a Salesforce partner is kind of look at how you're using or how you want to use a tool like Right On Interactive, and then help you integrate those touch points with Salesforce so that you can have those types that we talked about for your prospects and donors in your CRM. You don't have to give all of your staff access to your marketing automation tool. And then you can, set up integration between the campaigns and figure out if you need to, keep some of what you're doing with mass email in your existing system or move all of it over to a different tool. That sort of thing is something that we are very familiar with talking with clients through.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. You've got to remember that marketing automation tools are only as good as the data you're bringing in. So that's a really good point to point out to everybody.
Good. I have a couple more questions coming in. This one is, are there techniques that are similar between donor engagement and volunteer engagement? Can I use the same marketing strategies to grow my volunteer base?
Yeah, so I could speak to that briefly, and then Lila, you might actually have some thoughts from your own experience too, not to put you on the spot. But I guess I would say, just in a nutshell, that there's definitely a lot of overlap and a lot of pieces that you could apply to volunteers in addition to donors. And so, if you're looking to grow your volunteer base, a lot of what you might be trying to do is kind of tap into networks of people. And so, for example, if you have 10 really active volunteers, you could use some kind of targeted follow-up and even progressive profiling, moving people through the stages that Karen addressed in order to ask them to reach out to their networks and then have a measurable outcome where they could kind of come back and engage with you as well. So that's just off the top of my head, but We use tools like Volunteers for Salesforce and things like that too with our clients all the time. Lila, do you have any thoughts on anything I might have missed there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no, not any revolutionary additional thoughts, but I do think that it's the same approach, which is looking at who it is that you want to have interacting with your organization, at what level are they interacting, how do you want to deepen that engagement, and finding, ultimately there has to be some really intentional thought and clever strategies around this. It's not going to work if you just kind of like, this person likes fish, so I'm going to tell them about fish more and maybe they'll volunteer more with me. You really have to be paying attention to what people are interested in and, use clever ways of piquing their interest and keeping them interested. But certainly I think that it aligns, very closely with volunteer engagement and donor engagement. Ultimately, you're asking for something from someone. It's either financial or it's their time. So I think definitely you could use these sorts of marketing strategies in that context. I have another quick question, which is someone's asking if we are getting, a recording of the webinar, and yes, that will be sent out. The other question is, can you give a specific example of closed loop reporting?
Yeah, so I think I brought this up, so I feel like I should probably take responsibility for answering. But again, Karen, if you want to add something to this when I'm done, feel free. So the way I think about closed loop reporting is kind of a 360-degree view of the different touch points that lead someone to taking the action that you want them to take. And so maybe the end goal is to make them into a major donor, which is anyone who's donated more than $1,000, for example, or 10,000, whatever the benchmark is for your organization. And so closed loop reporting is when you use marketing automation software, lifecycle marketing software, to track those different touch points. And so initially when somebody comes to your website, you're usually just using IP address. And then once they give you their information, you can put in, or they become a lead or a contact in your system. And that way you can start tracking those different touch points of how many websites they view or how many events they go to, and which ones make them actually take the action or move on to the next stage in the cycle. So it's kind of just that, closed loop or 360-degree view that shows you the different things that might have influenced the initial or the eventual outcome that you want them to take.
I think that's a good definition, Kirsten, and just kind of to clarify too, it's just, making sure that all of the different touch points, are together and combined, so whether that's, email, web analytics, social media, all of those different things, just kind of giving you that holistic view.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we didn't really go into this that much today, but, a big piece of the strength of using marketing automation and lifecycle marketing software is having one place to go for that information. And so, for me personally, before I moved on to an automation tool, I was using HubSpot not HubSpot, but Hootsuite for social media and Google Analytics for website stuff, Drupal for web editing, 3 different email platforms for various reasons that I won't go into, in addition to Salesforce, and probably about 3 or 4 other things for free landing pages and keyword research and that sort of thing. And so really just having, even though you can do that, you can, create pretty fancy Excel spreadsheets where you measure those things over time and, just set aside a few hours a month to go into it. That definitely works for organizations for a while, but I think a lot of people see that there's this scalability point where you just can't keep cobbling things together once you reach a certain point. So that's where this can really have value.
All right, one more question here, and that is someone wanting to know a little bit more about feeling like they're not having a lot of success getting additional donors through their email marketing efforts, and wondering if we've seen organizations be successful with getting people to donate using email marketing, and what's the key to doing that?
Yeah, so I think one really key aspect is that email marketing is not the only tool in your tool belt, or Yeah, hopefully that's an appropriate metaphor for reaching out to new donors. It's just a component of your overall engagement strategy. And so, email marketing alone can be pretty tricky to generate leads because it requires, sending something to people you already know, which are already leads in your system, and making them refer new leads, right? That would be kind of the typical use case for that. And so I would say that considering a tactic like using events to attract new people and then advertising that through new channels in your community might be more helpful for generating new leads or new donors, new prospective donors for your organization, or even just focusing on having a few really specific calls to action in addition to just your donation page on your website where people can maybe I think one example that comes to mind is a client we work with, Pencils of Promise, had their CEO write a book last year that got on the New York Times bestseller list. So that doesn't happen to everyone, but when something like that happens to your organization, definitely take advantage of it. And people are looking for that book and wanting to start a conversation already with the organization. And so, making a part of your website devoted to kind of timely, top of the mind conversations that people are having already and having a lead form so that you can attract new people through those channels can be really helpful. Hopefully that answers it.
Great. Thanks, Kirsten. Well, we are just about at time, so thank you, everybody, for your attendance today. Thanks so much, Karen, for your perspectives on this important aspect of today's marketing journey, especially in the context of the nonprofit sector. I think that it's a really interesting conversation to be having, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm happy that we're having it with you guys today, and hopefully you've taken away some really interesting bits of information that you can start to think about how to incorporate into your processes internally. If you do have any questions or comments about today's content, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure that my contact information is available in the slide deck. And thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.